All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Billy Dees. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out our program before, first of all, welcome to the podcast. And just to let you know, we are primarily a commentary and an interview podcast. And today we kind of have both because I have a guest co-host with me, and we're going to be talking about what happened at the Oscars. And before you grit your teeth, I know a lot of people are talking about this. We're going to go in a different angle. We're going to cover a little bit what happened there in the celebrity part of it, but this is more of a wider issue in terms of how these things are consumed by the general public. I just did a podcast here a couple of weeks ago about a very controversial quarterback being brought into to the Cleveland Browns. And it's amazing to me here again how the perception of this is taken. And we're going to talk about that today. With me on the studio line is Rashmi. How are you doing today? Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Billy. This is wonderful. I have to say thank you for having me on your platform.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. Rashmi is all set up with a fantastic microphone and everything, so we're good to go. I'm really happy about that. She's taking audio very seriously, and that's great. As someone, I was one of those guys that had, back in the day, I had all the speakers, all the big speakers, and the real loud rock and roll. That was me, so it fits in. Okay. Unless you have been living under a rock somewhere, last week there was an incident at the Academy Awards, and there's a lot of layers to this, and we're going to try and go through this as best we can. Let me give you a little background. Award shows in general have been declining in the ratings, and there's a lot of reasons for this. If you're a young person, let's say under the age of 25, the chances that you watch broadcast TV with any regularity, with the exception of football games or something like that, is very small. You are probably streaming, and you're doing a lot of other things with like Netflix or what have you. And broadcast TV isn't what it used to be. So the ratings in these things, in a lot of cases, are dropping. With the Academy Awards in particular, COVID did not help the movie industry, to say the least. Going into a closed room for 2 hours with a bunch of strangers was not that appealing for a long time. Hopefully we're coming out of that in general. But that was a challenge for the movie industry. And the other thing that I've researched on this as well, here again, if you are part of younger generations, there's probably a good chance you are a lot more familiar with Logan Paul or somebody like that, Charlie D'Amelio, than you are with Will Smith or Denzel Washington or Brad Pitt. And those types of stars do not have the power that they once did to grab attention. So is this incident that happened at the Oscars, is it going to be a good thing or a bad thing? I know a lot of people have speculated that it was a stunt. I would say probably not. Let's start there, Rashmi. Do you feel that this was a stunt?
No, I don't personally think so. When I was watching it live, and I'm very particular about analyzing people. I guess that's the sociology background in me. But as I observed their emotions, their feelings, it seemed pretty real to me. It didn't seem like an act at all.
Yeah.
And obviously, just the reaction from Chris Rock. I personally think it was authentic.
Yeah. A couple of media analysts broke down some of the shots, and there was a period there where if you come in close on Chris Rock, he was looking off stage for direction. He was looking for somebody to tell him what to do. He wasn't sure if the broadcast was going to be ended or what have you. So on whatever level, I mean, we can speculate about the fact, well, everybody's talking about the Academy Awards. They haven't talked about this much about the Academy Awards since Titanic. Okay. But is this the type of image that the Oscars want in terms of the future, in terms of capturing the attention of a new generation? I'm not so sure. But anyway, here again, if you somehow missed it, Chris Rock made a joke about the wife of Will Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith. And this was in regard to her baldness. And he made a joke, something about that G.I. Jane 2 was going to be coming out with her being the star. I actually had to investigate this a little bit. G.I. Jane was a movie that in which I can't think of her name right now. The actress
Demi Moore.
Demi Moore, correct. She shaved her head, and I know she's always been very conscious about her physical appearance. She's always been a workout fanatic, but she obviously, wanted to look like a military worthy person. I believe it was Navy SEALs or something. I don't remember. But anyway, this role obviously required short hair. So he made this joke about Jada Pinkett Smith starring in G.I. Jane 2. Easy for me to say, right? And the implication was because she was bald that she would fit the role. Now, where the controversy comes in is that this baldness is from a condition called alopecia. Am I saying that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so a lot of people, the body shaming people who have defended this whole thing, and one way or another, whether they agree with the slap or not, say that this was something that, pulled a trigger. I was listening to Bill Maher the other night, last night, as a matter of fact, and he pointed out that alopecia is not the same as, let's say, ridiculing somebody who's not walking correctly because of ALS. Okay, this isn't that. A lot of people have alopecia. As a matter of fact, it's very common in the population the older that you get. So this wasn't on the scale of offensiveness by my standards. This was not that particularly high. But nonetheless, Will Smith walked up onto the stage and smacked Chris Rock. And we're going to talk about the particulars of that because there are some things worth noting here. There's a lot of layers to this. Like I said, let's start. And you pointed this out in some of your show notes here, that initially when Will Smith heard the joke, he laughed. But he turned and he saw what you might call the stink eye from his wife, and his reaction changed. Did you? And I know in regard to masculinity, do you feel that this somehow pulled a trigger in him about his masculinity, letting his wife being made fun of? Did that trigger something?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. I think there's so many layers to it. Will just came out with his book, and there's a lot in there. I haven't read it. However, I have recently been published my own book. I've recently come across many excerpts from the book. And I think with one of the statements I believe he says in there, I don't want to, say it the wrong way, but there's something along the lines of the trauma from his childhood and seeing his mother get beaten is so obviously something he's still working on. Mm-hmm. And something that he felt when he was a child was feeling like a coward because he couldn't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I take that. And of course, with this whole thing that happened at the Oscars, all the things that are going on in his head, he sees his wife, he kind of looks at what's going on in her eyes. And then maybe he's thinking about his book. He's thinking about his past, so many layers. And then all of a sudden, his emotions get the better of him. And he's like, what am I going to do? I need to make this what he thought was a right. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it was a wrong. But his mind, he was like, I got to do something about it. And it was, it was what he did that was not right. The violence is absolutely, uncalled for.
Yes. A lot of people have come out in defense of this. I am not one of them. All right. We can't have a society where every comedy show you go to, every speech that you go to, somebody's doing a presentation at work. Anytime somebody comes up with something that you don't agree with or triggers you in some way, you can't walk up to them and slap them. We just cannot have a world like that. Okay.
No.
Let's go back to Jada Pinkett Smith. A lot of people have talked about their relationship and the dynamics of that. I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know. I did notice excerpts of the interview or the discussion Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith had a little discussion in the wake of her sleeping with another man. And some of the things that happened in that conversation seemed a little off to me. For example, she said during that interview, and I may be paraphrasing here, somebody said something to Will Smith in the wake of this incident. Oh, I'm surprised that you let this person sleep with your wife. And she's discussing, and she says, well, first of all, my husband doesn't tell me who I can sleep with. Now, and he nodded his head in agreement. Now, they might have some sort of an open relationship or something, but I got to tell you, that's an odd statement. I can't imagine me ever saying something that heartless or mean-spirited to my wife in private, let alone in the public domain. Does that give you some insight into the dynamics of that relationship?
For sure. I've been hearing a lot of that too about their relationship. So this Oscar incident all of a sudden has shed light on their relationship. I really didn't know much about their relationship. I haven't really researched that, but that toxic relationship, whatever people want to call it right now, that happens in the privacy of their own, household or whatever. I can't really speak to that because I'm not there. I'm not, their therapist. From an outsider's perspective, how you treat your partner in public has a lot to say about how you treat each other in person.
Yes.
So I think, that statement that you just said, which I wasn't familiar with, I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah. And here again, I don't know. I've heard different things that they were technically broken up or going through a bad patch at the time. And some people have called it an open relationship. I'm not an expert on, nor do I care about that part of it. But what I do care about is where we are going to go next with this. And that is, and by the way, I don't have any fascination with any type of star. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the podcast. I don't have that. Okay. But what I do get concerned about is, as these things are bantered about, there is an aspect to how these things are received, in particular by children. And there is a certain normalcy now to dysfunction, to bad behavior. And a lot of people refer to it as toxic masculinity. Let's start there. How would you define toxic masculinity?
So I believe it's basically a norm that people follow. It's that adhering to violent, aggressive, maybe alpha male-ish type of personality or behavior, actions, thoughts, feelings. And there's a stigma behind, a man being emotional and showing and presenting his soft side.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is what toxic masculinity is. And it is a norm that society and a gender and social norm, where if you hear it out in the public and you're raised within it, and that's what your external experience is, then that's what you start believing. It's kind of like the looking glass self, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you hear and how you have to act and what you say to people is basically how it kind of projects who you are, because maybe you haven't done the internal work from within to be able to show whatever side. And I think, and I talk about this in my book as well, is that we are exposed to gender norms and social norms, but if we're not doing something about it, then things are just going to stay the same. And if we are not being true to ourselves and how we want to behave in front of other people, then there's a lot of insecurity there. Mm-hmm. And you have to dismantle those insecurities, and you must disrupt the norm, because otherwise change is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Your book is titled Confident, Resilient, Fearless, A Guide to Revival from Within. I just want to let the audience know that, and I presume it's available on Amazon and all the usual places.
It is. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indigo, Google Play, Apple, iTunes. This is it over here. Yeah, you can get it pretty much everywhere.
Okay. What does the book cover? I mean, obviously, you talk about gender norms. How would you describe the scope of the book?
The scope of the book is pretty broad because the key points in this is that the external world really plays a big role on our thoughts, perceptions, and understanding. And sometimes these human experiences that we have as we're, growing up begin to they cast shadows on some of our powerful traits that we were born with. Because I think everybody is born pretty confident, resilient, and fearless. The things that we go through, during our childhood, we know that there's a lot of confidence and resilience. And then these human experiences all of a sudden start to change that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we begin to, for some people, we build insecurities, we become negative. And I'm not saying I'm talking about the negative experiences. And that is pretty broad as well, like overwhelm, stress, trauma, illness. There's so many things that can, impact you from your human experiences, poverty, intergenerational trauma, and also these gender norms and social norms, because we're exposed to all that. Mm-hmm. And as a woman coming from an East Indian background, there are a lot of cultural, social norms that we basically adhere to. And that brings to light why we have to advocate and change what has already been happening. So I talk about that within my book, but also key principles that we have to learn to move forward in so many different areas of our lives, which are learn and unlearn, feel comfortable with uncomfortable, and rewire the fixed mindset. And if you want to do that personal work for personal growth and development, I would say that you can touch upon so many different areas of your life to become better. Because I think when you want to become better, you're more peaceful within. Mm-hmm. And that really will determine how you act, your emotional intelligence with people, your social emotional intelligence with people, and yourself. At the end of the day, we are constantly exposed to the world around us, whether it's social media, work, family. That communication is constantly happening. Yeah. And of course, with this particular situation that happened at the Oscars, the whole world was watching. Yes. And to be able to sit in peace just for a moment to collect your own thoughts before acting could have changed this whole scenario.
Sure. The one thing that really is kind of sad, we hear about Chris Rock, and I'm sure what he went through was not pleasant. I believe that he handled it very well. The upside is, though, his ticket prices have more value now. It has done well for him, and he is someone who is a millionaire. There's a lot of people who get slapped every day, physically slapped, and have no recourse. They just have to go home and suck it up. Okay, so where, though, in that room, I also have some empathy. I have some empathy for Chris Rock. I also have some empathy for a lot of the people who may have worked their whole life perfecting their craft, going to school, whatever, maybe put up a fortune to invest in their film or whatever it is that they have done. And their dream was to win an Academy Award or be nominated. And all this pretty much got upstaged by this act. And that's something quite frankly, a lot of people don't even know what Will Smith won for. He overshadowed himself. So I'm pretty sure we can all agree that that's the dark side of toxic masculinity. Some more examples of toxic masculinity. What would they be? Now, you touched on, for example, I was a victim of it to a degree. I had a fair amount of athletic ability when I was young. I was not a athletic person per se. At the competing school, there was a football player by the name of Chris Spielman who went on to become a professional. During that time, when I was in high school, he was the first high school player to be featured on a Wheaties box. Okay. And certainly at that time, my dad was very enamored with the idea of me playing football and all that. And I really felt pressured to do that. And that was not in my blood. I was never going to be Chris Spielman. It was never going to happen. You have to have a desire and a fight to play that game that well, or you're going to get hurt. And that's what was happening to me. I wanted to do other things that my dad perceived as unboyish. Okay. That's a classic example of how toxic masculinity can work against you. Are there other examples of it?
Yeah, I would say within the school when you are bullies, if you are supposed to be a certain way and not take certain things, you could become a bully. There are people who will definitely not cry. I've had experiences while I was a vice principal with parents who would come in and be like, no, I don't want to talk to the female vice principal. I'd like to talk to the male. And, that's toxic masculinity because you are not comfortable with speaking to a woman because we're considered maybe, subordinate in the culture. I would say what else? Just aggression, how you deal with aggression.
Okay. You mentioned the patriarchy as well. I know a lot that word has become a buzzword. Conservatives hate it. Liberals love it. Objectively speaking, how would you describe what the patriarchy is?
Similar to toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, trying to go against the patriarchy is basically trying to overcome what the social or cultural gender norms are, which is to be, at an elevated, you're kind of on a pedestal as a man. You have to be a breadwinner. You have to, you're going to be paid more with whatever you do. You must wear the pants in the family. The guy gets the last say. You can be, as a man, you can be firm in a company, whereas a woman is called,
a bitch, for lack,
for lack of a better word.
Okay, that's what they said.
And that is all part of the patriarchy. And again, I think those terms kind of go hand in hand: toxic masculinity and patriarchy. Women are still fighting the fight. And although, in March was International Women's Month, and there was International Women's Day, which I'm a big advocate for, but it doesn't stop for me there. This is something that I constantly advocate within schools. And although, the system makes a lot of the decisions, with the different roles that I've had within schools, I've definitely advocated for women's empowerment, and also have spoken about how we must teach young boys, men, to be able to be comfortable with being emotional. And I think this really starts young, because when you want to build that culture, that as soon as it's instilled in you at a young age, you're going to carry it with you, especially when it's meaningful. That's the key part, is meaningful. Make it meaningful to people. And young minds can be molded. And that's why there are pros and cons to the external world. It can go both ways.
When you're talking about pros and cons, I'm going to present a little scenario to you. And I've had a number of discussions with women about this, and I've given this example just to find out what their reaction is. And when I say you in this example, I don't mean you personally. I don't want to touch on what your personal life is like, but I just mean accepting a hypothetical situation. Okay. Let's say you are in bed at night. It's 2:00 in the morning, and your husband or your better half is there, and there's a crash downstairs. It sounds like somebody forced open a window. Okay. And your husband hands you the phone and says, you better call 911, and he goes under the bed. Okay. That's example number one. Example number two is you're in bed at 2:00 in the morning with John Wick. Okay. And, Keanu Reeves with the long hair and the scruffy beard. And you hear a crash downstairs. And John Wick says, somebody's going to die. I'll be right back. Okay. Which one would you rather have? And you don't necessarily have to comment on it, but this does bring in a very legitimate point in terms of where men are at now. Okay, there's times when men are supposed to be very laid back in situations, not overspeak over the woman, and that's fine. There are other situations like what's happening right now in the Ukraine, where women and children are being ushered out. Men are expected to be Rambo. They're expected to stay and fight. So there's this conflict that a lot of men go through. They're not sure what role to play at the right time. So do you want to react to that?
Sure. That's a totally fair point. And I can understand. I feel like I can look at perspectives and kind of step into somebody's shoes, because obviously as men, I can only imagine how difficult it is as well. I'm a feminist, but that doesn't mean that I would not support how a man is feeling. As for what my choice would be, I would go with John Wick. Like, he's a good looking guy. Yeah. Keanu Reeves is a good looking guy. And he's Canadian, and so am I. But I picked John Wick because of, he looks good.
Can't argue with that. Time has been much kinder to him than it has been Tom Cruise. Yes. We're all the same age. And Brad Pitt. And I'm their age, but that's about it. That's where the similarities end. Okay. In this case here, a lot of women, like I said, have supported Will Smith in this action defending his wife, and I say in spirit it is correct. I would have to say that the reaction to this joke, even in the best case scenario, was over the top. You can argue whether the joke was offensive or not. Me personally, I kind of believe that comedy has a certain nature where it's best when it is a little offensive. When I did comedy years ago, two people that I always felt were in the stratosphere. They were beyond what comedians were. Two people, and these two guys were the holy grail, as far as I'm concerned, for doing stand-up. And one of them was Richard Pryor, and the other one was George Carlin. Now, you could laugh at a lot of what they would say on the surface, but on your way home or after the show, you'd say, a little bell would go off in your head and say, you know what? They were right. Whatever commentary they were making about society, maybe we should rethink that. And they were effective because they did push your buttons. They were a little bit offensive. Are we living in a society now where you can't do that?
You can, or sorry, you can't. Oh, you're saying
that you can't. Like, for example, a lot of the things that Richard Pryor said, a lot of the things that George Carlin said would have people, up in arms now. But their points hit home because they were microaggressions to a certain degree. Their jokes were that. Are we making it hard now for comedians to examine society without anytime you hear something that's out of your ideological spectrum, you're going to be offended and you're going to turn them off? Is it difficult for comedians now? And I know a lot of comedians have come to the defense of Chris Rock in this situation because they're faced with hostile crowds that they didn't have 10 years ago. So are we getting to the point now where, and here's, I'll make this point before I throw it to you. If you and I are having a discussion and you disagree with me on something, but I can make you laugh, I've made an inroad into your psyche. Okay. And I think that's why a lot of the political correctness people are afraid of comedy, because they know that if a comedian can make you laugh about something that you believe, they've made an inroad into your psyche. That's a very powerful tool. And that's what George Carlin and Richard Pryor did. Is that tool being taken away from us now? It's now acceptable to slap somebody that makes a joke you don't like.
Yeah, I definitely think that people are going to rethink their jokes for sure. I've never been opposed to comedians. I personally like them. I think that they there's always there's a saying, there's always a little truth in a lie.
Sure.
And it's kind of like the same thing as a joke. There is truth to that joke. How your psyche kind of handles it or what it thinks about next, that's everybody's own perspective and their own unique way of however they grew up. I hope this doesn't, I do, even as, an educator, I love comedy. And yes, I used to have these conversations with my students. The reality is some of the comedians just go a little over the edge.
Yeah.
But I think it's always thought provoking.
Sure.
You could have teaching and learning moments in comedy. I guess that's what comedy always has been, and continues to be. But when something like this happens, then everybody questions it, because now you've just brought violence to the forum. Well, now everybody's going to be talking about comedy.
Yeah.
Right. And how like what the impact could be.
What would you say in terms of what this incident has done? People are talking about it, and then there's people making jokes about it, which is, I'm fine with all that. But for the young, impressionable people, you talk often about students, and as an educator, how should we be framing this for them?
I posed the question, what did you guys think? And it was so interesting to hear young people have such valid opinions about it. And I didn't even say the word toxic masculinity. One of my students did. And that was refreshing, because that particular student was saying how that impacts all of us as young people. That was a breath of fresh air. I've had such amazing conversations with young people who really know they're not especially Generation Z, they're not falling for, these norms. They're questioning norms. And if we can inspire them and empower them to question these norms, well, then we're going to see change. And for a young man to not kind of go with, that's such a guy thing, for him to be able to oppose that and bring light to the reality of these norms and, toxic masculinity, I was very appreciative.
Yeah. I'll ask you one more question. You talk about the current young generation. I've had a number of different conversations with educators recently. And one of the things that really upsets them is it's so easy to write them off. They're worthless. They don't do anything but stare at their phone. They have no idea what the real world is like. Everything has been handed to them. There's a lot of truth to that, like you said, to some degree, but they also have faced a lot of challenges that prior generations have not. How would you, and here again, in standing up for the young people today, what would you want the audience to know?
To give them a chance, because their walk, we don't know their walk of life. We really don't know each person's walk of life. And because I've been in several roles in education, whether it be special education, school success coach, vice principal, as well as a teacher, one thing, and now an author, and I advocate for young people in here for that very reason. You don't know their walk of life, but when you give them an opportunity to share in a safe, supportive, respectful environment, you are going to see layers of things come through. And when you start taking off those external layers and what they've gone through, it doesn't matter what it is. There's so many different, layers that people have. You're going to see the real person within. And if you can get to that real person within, wow, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The relationship you form with people, it can be quite fascinating. So I would say give children or give kids, young adults, the opportunity to really share in a safe, supportive environment, their life, their experiences.
That's great answer. You command a lot of respect. You have a lot of knowledge, just a great person to have on the show. I just love every answer you've given. Great stuff to think about. The author is Rashmi Mistry, and the book is titled Confident, Resilient, Fearless, A Guide to Revival from Within. I would very much encourage you to check that out. Now, we're not exactly wrapping things up yet. I'm going to give just my little summary, little take on this whole Chris Rock, Will Smith thing. And then I will give Rashmi the last word. Okay. And you feel free to disagree with me. You are a co-host. If you want to say, hey, you're full of it, you go right ahead. Okay. As some of you may have surmised by now, I'm not 21 years old anymore. I don't have any starry-eyed notions of how wonderful and sweet the world would be. As a matter of fact, I've had a mixed history when it comes to being around toxic people. I've been around abusers, horrible abusers. I've been around mean drunks. And yes, I've had confrontations with them. And they weren't pleasant. But you know what all of these people have in common, at least with my experience? They all have in common charm. They're the most charming people in the world. They have a smile that lights up the room. Everybody loves them, and they're a laugh a minute. And when you tell people about some of their behavior, they don't believe it. Because these guys are just so lovable, aren't they? Everybody just loves them. As I mentioned, I did comedy a while back, 15, 20 years ago, and I was never a superstar, but I got around a little bit, and I had the opportunity to meet a number of headliners, and a lot of them came from the West Coast. And as I had conversations with these individuals, there were two comedians that they didn't really speak that highly about. And oddly enough, these were not the two people that you would expect at the time. The first consistency was Robin Williams stole material. The second consistency was Bill Cosby was not a good guy. This was very consistent with almost every major headliner that I met. And it was consistent enough that, I kind of believed it, even though when I told other people about, I don't believe it. The fact of the matter is I did, because I have been familiar with those smiles. I have been familiar with that charm. And, with Will Smith, he can do all the videos he wants about your attitude towards work and life experiences and how you should approach everyday things. And he can say it with a smile, but you know what? For some reason, I never buy that stuff. I don't trust people who don't say dirty things once in a while. And in this PC correct world, we give such credence to always saying the right thing at the right time, using the right syllable emphasis in the right place, using the right terminology. We don't want to say this as opposed to that because that's offensive. And the people who always say the right things and always smile at the right times are the people that I never really trust. The people that are going to put their cards on the table and show you who they really are, they don't get enough credit. As a matter of fact, I would go as far to say that a lot of the people who will talk dirt, a lot of people who will say offensive things, are the very people who are going to help you when the chips are down. The smiley people, the charming people, they're nowhere around when you really need them. Okay? So as we evaluate this, let's kind of keep that in mind. Paul Rodriguez, who was a comedian, still is a comedian as far as I know, he's one of the people that now have come out and said he recognized that smug look that Will Smith had after he smacked Chris Rock, because he was the subject of, according to him, of verbal abuse by him. And he was in a position where what could he say about one of the biggest stars in the world? He was on a set where he had to take it. And this is where you really have to be careful. Okay? Don't get taken in by people who play the music that you like, who are political figures who walk the line that you happen to like, or who play for the football team or the basketball team that you want to win. Okay, always treat these things as objectively as possible. I don't know whether this thing that happened at the Oscars was orchestrated or not, whether it was a setup or not, but act or not, in the end, this was nothing but a vaudeville act. And it was a poor one at best. The Three Stooges did it better, quite honestly. I feel sorry for the legitimate winners and things who didn't get the attention that they deserved. But as a whole, this is a group of people. This is a group of people in the audience and on stage who are millionaires congratulating each other on how well they play other people in a part of town where just a couple of minutes down the road, there's one of the largest populations of tent cities in the United States. So let's keep this in perspective. These people, these celebrities, are not heroes. And I come from Canton, Ohio, the home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I hear the word hero all the time referred to in football players. And some of them do give back to the community as well they should. It's the least that they can do. But the fact of the matter is these actors there at the Academy Awards, they're not falling on grenades for the people next to them. Okay. They are what they are. And if anything, we shouldn't be giving them a pass because they do work that we like, because of the fact that they are among the most privileged people in the world. We should be holding them to a higher standard. We should be holding them as people who are benefactors of our generosity. We can live without entertainment. We give them that money because they entertain us, and they should behave accordingly. And that goes for the professional football players and everybody else. And here is where I would say is we have to examine ourselves. As I mentioned earlier, there's a quarterback who has been brought into the Cleveland Browns organization, paid $230 million. This guy has not played in the last year due to allegations, and he may not even play this coming year because he might be suspended by the NFL. He has 22 allegations in civil court that are still pending, and yet he got $230 million guaranteed. And there's a lot of Browns fans who just think this is the greatest thing. And I'd be willing to bet, I can't prove it, but I'd be willing to bet there's a lot of people sitting around that office of the Browns saying, yeah, you know what, this is going to cause a stink at first. All the Me Too people are going to complain. And then as the summer goes along and then we start winning, that'll fade by the wayside. And you know what's really sad about that? That's correct. That's exactly what's going to happen. So maybe we as a society should be deciding what we are going to accept. It's one thing to sit back and wonder what the Academy is going to do. How are we going to react to these stars who behave this way? And in a way that, quite frankly, would have any of us involved in a lawsuit or thrown in jail. Same with these athletes who batter their girlfriends and do other things. And as long as the owner can get them off and they can play on Sunday, we'll cheer for them running down the field. Maybe it's us. Maybe we are the problem. Maybe we should be giving more attention to educators. Maybe we should be giving more attention to nurses. Maybe we should be giving more attention to firemen who run into a burning house for the salary of $50,000 a year. And those actors who portray that same action get $10 million a year pretending to do it. And as a matter of fact, they don't even do it. The stuntmen do it. So maybe we need to re-examine that a little bit. Maybe we should put our priorities on people who are actually making the world a better place, people who are actually curing disease, people who are actually working on the issues of poverty, people who are actually trying to make the world safe for everyone. I don't know. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, as someone else so famously said. Rashmi, I'll give you the closing word.
There were so many great things you had stated in that last piece, Billy. Well, you had so many great things to say in general, but what I really liked is you have to examine yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you can't examine it by yourself, you read, help, be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable in your own insecurities, you are going to be fearless. And that in itself is going to be so valuable in your personal development, personal growth. And I hope that because celebrities are always put on this pedestal because they're always in, the limelight, if they took that point just for integrity's sake, for themselves to examine within, I think that there would be so many better people out there. And, I'm a big advocate for making this world a better place. Examine within.
Yes. And here again, let me say the title of your book, And I really like this: confident, resilient, fearless, a guide to revival from within. And that really is an important point, because if you don't, as you examine these situations, if you don't expect more from yourself and you don't expect more from the people who are influencing you, you did an excellent piece the other day I caught, where you're often, well, I believe the quote was, "You're the sum of the 5 people closest to you."
Yeah, it's a Jim Rohn quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, be the average, or you're the average. You're the average of the 5 people you. I can't remember exactly what the quote is. I don't want to say it the wrong way, but it's a Jim Rohn quote.
Okay, well, all right,
Be the average of 5 people that you hang around.
yeah,
With.
we'll say we're paraphrasing it, but
Yeah, we're paraphrasing.
You got the idea across. And I
Yeah.
would go as far to say, as if you're excusing bad behavior from the politician that you like, if you're excusing bad behavior from the rock star that you like, if you are excusing the basketball player, the star basketball player on your team because you want to win, you are bringing something into the aspect of who you are that is very unhealthy. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Like I said, integrity. If
Yeah.
you have a good idea of your own integrity and your own personal values, and if you're going to adhere to them, it's going to be pretty powerful within. I have this story it's a old Cherokee story, where I present this to students in every grade that I've taught, and I've taught for 20 years. It's a story about the good wolf and the bad wolf, and which one do you feed? Because you have both of them within, but the one that you feed is the one that's going to be the most powerful.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to kind of look from within, is like, who are you feeding? Because at the end of the day, we have that. We have that. That's human nature. We have the bad wolf and the good wolf within us.
Yes.
But what are you doing to feed the one particular wolf? Because that's who you're going to come out looking like.
Yeah. I'm paraphrasing here, but there's a quote by Sitting Bull that actually speaks to that. And the quote goes something like this: "Inside of me, there are 2 dogs. One is mean and evil, and the other is good. When asked which one wins, I answer, the one I feed the most."
Yes, that's the one. That's very similar story. That's the one, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
Where the grandfather is telling the grandson, that's the one that wins is the one you feed. That you said the last one is perfect. The way you said it was exactly right.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the principles of that, right? You have within you evil and wrongs and negativity or insecurities. But again, it might not be because you were born with them. This can be created from your exposure to the external world. We don't choose, the family we, are born into.
Sure.
And, nobody is. So, but what happens after that really guides you in how you become, or it shapes you. It shapes your thoughts, feelings, actions. But I also say you can't blame a child, but you can blame an adult.
Sure.
A child is still, developing. They're still under construction. And there's a huge piece in neuroscience when it comes to the frontal cortex and development. And so a child is malleable. Whereas an adult, you're still malleable, but you have to do the work. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
You have to, come to terms with what you need for your life.
Absolutely. I don't believe you can understate the power of indoctrination from a young age. And I'll give you an example. And I don't want to make everybody nervous here when I talk about religion, but this statistic is undeniable. You go around the world, whether it's the Muslim faith, Islam, whether it's a Jewish faith, whether it's Buddhist, whether it's some form of Christianity, the vast majority of people in the world who have a faith believe what their parents believed and what their culture believed. There is very seldom any variance. And if I would challenge you in terms of what you believe, that's been so indoctrinated into you, you would probably resist that. But the fact of the matter is, a child growing up in a home where alcoholism is the religion, that's the indoctrination. And how hard is that to undo? How hard is that when somebody has been, let's say, toxically indoctrinated into something? How hard is that to undo? Can it be done?
Yes, it can be it can be undone. However, you can't undo the other person, but you can undo yourself. That's
Okay.
what it is. It's the individual work that you have to do. However, as a child, you're still helping. You have to help navigate a young person in how to dismantle and disrupt and
Mm-hmm.
how to come to terms with certain things. As an adult, there's differentiation there, but I do think that, like you said, the religion is a very sensitive topic. But one of the principles, be comfortable with uncomfortable, but know what you're talking about. I had many religious conversations with parents who come from a certain faith that have certain beliefs. I also I grew up in a Hindu family. I was, exposed to Hinduism pretty much all my life, but I question things all the time because I don't just fall for a religion. I have my own beliefs because I believe no matter what religion you are, you must be good and compassionate, kind, in order for you to be at one with God, because that's what I think God is. And so when I have these religious conversations with people, I was like, there are some really religious people out there, because there's a book and somebody that talks to them about religion who will change their views and thoughts. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that they're good and compassionate from inside. It comes from within. It's not a book that's going to tell me how to behave. It's going to come from within. Yes, I can use the book to help me navigate what my thoughts are, or what good and what evil is. But at the end of the day, I like to say that I'm honest. I take things from different religions and believe that there's some wise teachings and philosophies in so many different religions. But I'm not going to go with just a book that says things that I may not agree with, but I might take points in there that are valuable because I can use that and it resonates with me. So, but you're right. Like when you're in a family where there's alcoholism, yes, you're going to be, and I've had situations where students do come from families like this, where we're really, going through what their external experience is. And so, can we work on that? Yes, but it's a work that will be in progress.
Right.
It doesn't disappear overnight, their experiences, because it is quite traumatic.
Rashmi, where can people find you online?
You can follow me on Instagram. I am at Confident, Resilient, Fearless. I have an author page as well on Instagram. It's author_Rashmi Mistry. And I'm also on TikTok, author_Rashmi Mistry.
Awesome. Well, I certainly hope people search you out. You have some great content, great videos. Did you say at one point you may be doing some like a podcast or something?
Yes. You know what? This is my first, guest appearance. So I'm so thankful, Billy D. You definitely have given me some really great insight on podcasting. So you probably were the first person that I touched base with. So yeah, maybe in the future I'll be, having a podcast out soon.
That would be awesome. I have no doubt. Yeah, you would be wonderful at it because you're such a good speaker. Again, the book, Confident, Resilient, Fearless, A Guide to Revival from Within, author Rashmi Mistry. Thank you very much, Rashi. Thank you so much for being here. You make me seem smarter than what I really am.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great conversation. I really appreciate that you invited me on your platform.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Hey, I'm Billy Dees, real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees, and I have a link tree in my bio on Twitter. So that means you can find all my social media platforms right there. And even if you want to search me out on individual social media platforms, it's always Billy Dees. And there's very little variation to that. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on down the line. We always want to say hi to our friends over at Good Pods. that is a great platform if you enjoy independent creators. And we also do YouTube. So thank you very much for checking out our podcast today. And we'll talk to you again next week.